Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. The blurring of lines between the physical, digital, and biological worlds. That's what the fourth industrial revolution is all about. Digital era technologies are slowly merging with humans' physical lives and are fast becoming indispensable to modern life. Physiotherapists are also entering a new era that is having profound effects on the way we practice, creating challenges, we can see that now, whilst at the same time presenting new opportunities for physiotherapists to enhance their practice. So this is a snippet from an article I wrote and presented at the Health Professional Council of South Africa, the national conference in 2019. But presently, the COVID-19 pandemic is forcing physiotherapists to look at new ways of delivering our healthcare services. With this lockdown, our hands-on approach needs to be enhanced with the addition of another set of tools in our toolbox, telehealth. The World Health Organization defines telehealth as the use of telecommunication and virtual technology to deliver healthcare outside of the traditional healthcare facilities. Online research has highlighted a number of different terms, all depending on the discipline performing the service, such as telespeech, teletherapy, tele-PT, telepractice, telemedicine, and of course, telerehabilitation. For us physiotherapists, we are more familiar with this. It's rather overwhelming. I know at this time we're worried, we're stressed, we're anxious. But thankfully, through the course of our research, we found Telehealth SA. So thank you to Tian and your team. And with your assistance, we are slowly starting to get to grips with this technology. I think many of us are in the same boat. We have never provided a telehealth service before. What question can we as physiotherapists ask right now? We can ask, are we ready to engage in this digital era, whilst at the same time being mindful of the importance of human and ethical factors? Telehealth technology platforms are offering physiotherapists opportunities and new and novel ways to assess, treat, and provide interventions for our patients. These technologies can complement and augment the traditional way of physiotherapy. So we have tools in our toolbox. We just have to dig them out. Some of them may be rusty, so we may need to polish them up or even acquire new ones. For example, a telehealth platform. So you may be thinking or asking yourself, how as physiotherapists can we assess and treat our patients online by using sensors besides touch, during our subjective and objective assessment. We have to listen carefully to our patient's story, also observing their posture, gait, how they walk, their expressions when we're speaking to them, their emotions. Most important, how they are executing the movements that we are describing to them at home during the telehealth session. We also have to build communication skills, our vocabulary, the way we cue our patients, the way we demonstrate our exercises. All these skills need to be ramped up. But the good thing and the positive thing is combining all this during our assessment, we can work as a team with our patients and come up with an appropriate treatment plan. This can, or rather should, include education of our patient's condition and an appropriate and effective exercise prescription. All this in preparation to get our patients better. I truly believe that telehealth will definitely complement and augment our existing hands-on treatment and rehabilitation programs, even long after this lockdown period is over. Thankfully, a lot of physiotherapists are moving away from a dominantly hands-on approach. We have been upskilling our therapy to include, for example, things like the biopsychosocial approach and models used to empower our patients so that they can be more in control of their condition and rehabilitation process. But especially during this lockdown period, telehealth will keep us or help us to keep in touch with our patients. How so? For example, something as simple as sending our patients a virtual hug will help to deliver the human emotional element of therapy that we are so good at. So besides the services that I have mentioned, so assessment, consultation, education, other services can include counseling, especially for our chronic pain patients, supervising and intervention for our patients at home. If, for example, our patient, if we see telehealth is not helping our patient, so we might say, okay, rather you come to the practice. Training and mentoring, we need to train each other. We need to go for training to be able to use telehealth technologies. With mentoring, our younger physiotherapists, the community service physiotherapists that are in the rural areas, mentoring can help them quite a bit. Networking, especially for our elderly patients and our physically disabled patients. We can use this as a tool of networking. These patients are not usually unable to come so often to the practice. Telehealth can extend the physiotherapy reach where services are not available, for example, rural areas. It can enable access when an in-person visit is not possible. We see this in the lockdown period. For our patients, convenience is important. They don't have to physically drive to our practice. And also they can do their rehab in the comfort own how. Telehealth can improve functional and other outcomes. So for us as physiotherapists, what's important is the exercise compliance. Care can be continuous from the hospital setting to the home setting. So there is fewer readmissions into the hospital. So the Health Professional Council have set out a rule that physiotherapists can only apply synchronous telehealth. So what does that mean? We are only allowed to do these consultations in a real-time interaction between physio and patient or his caregiver. This means that it must be live, our consultations must be live, it must be face-to-face, and what's important, it must have an audio and a video component. Hanita and myself have some stories of how we are managing to get our heads around this telehealth technology. So Hanita and myself are both using Zoom, but there are other platforms available out there. When I did my first telehealth consultation, it was with my sister in the UK. She's a doctor and she just wanted something to de-stress her. So usually when she was in South Africa, she used to come to me for a massage. But I must say, my sister enjoyed her mindful breathing session. I could actually see the calmness in her face and yet in her voice. So when Hanita did her yoga session a day later, what was great was the two of us got together just a couple of moments before the session. We logged on earlier so that we could iron out things like video positioning. So Hanita's clients have not attended her class for over a week because of the lockdown. And suffice to say, they were glad to get back to class even though it was a virtual class. They all came back with positive feedback. We did have challenges: poor internet connectivity, poor lighting, audio problems, but all that can be ironed out with practice and preparation. Hanita and myself have learned valuable lessons so far in our telehealth practice sessions. For now, we have just been practicing on our patient, on our family and friends. But I must tell you, already it's feeling more easy and comfortable to do. Telehealth is an awesome, awesome tool. Once it's in the hands of a therapist that knows how to use it. That is why it's vitally important to unpack ethical engagement consideration when it comes to using telehealth. For our patients and end users, our patients must be informed of the digitization of our practice. For example, we can send out an email to say we're going to add telehealth to our existing services, and we need to reassure them of its proper use. An informed consent process is vital in a form that we send out to them to sign, as well as a verbal consent just before the session. Training at all levels is important as well. For our personnel, those people that interact with our patients' personal health data, we need to train them. At a professional level, us physiotherapists need to do continuous professional development courses and training to enable us to be fit for practicing in this digital age. For our future healthcare professionals and practitioners, our students, curriculums must integrate three fundamental literacies, namely data literacy, technological literacy, and human literacy. Finally, ethical, legal, and social issues in South Africa. South Africa, with its diverse cultures, with its language barriers, socio-economic aspects, it's very important to look at this before we even look at giving one of our patients a telehealth session. The cultural level acceptance. So say, for instance, an elderly patient, they may not be tech savvy. So they may not like telehealth, or they may not be able to use telehealth. For us physiotherapists, we may think everything is fine, just like it is now, but we've realized it isn't. Risks to our patient safety must be taken into account. So finally, what I have to say in this slide is the only reasonable way to ensure that the benefits of telehealth are maximized and the risks are minimized is if we as physiotherapists and other healthcare workers take an active role in the development of this technology in our country. Our clinical knowledge and input thereof is vital in this development. Lastly, ethical engagement must take place at organization and governance level. These are where policies and regulatory frameworks and procedures are put in place. Although there are policies and regulations governing physiotherapists' interactions with their patients, but this is face-to-face interaction. So there needs to now be further engagement when it comes to the use of telehealth consultations. Hanita will touch on the challenges that goes with using this technology in South Africa. Over to you, Hanita.
Thank you, Jay. Jay has already mentioned a few of the challenges that we've experienced when using telemedicine. And I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on what those challenges were and how we actually overcame some of the challenges. So the first challenge I'm going to talk about is around connectivity. And when we're looking at connectivity, we are looking at things like what could possibly affect a smooth transition or a smooth session. And some of the challenges that we've experienced was load shedding, cable theft, poor reception. And this all affected the ability to have or host a smooth, continuous session with our participants. The other challenge that one has to look into is the challenge around infrastructure. There are places with either poor infrastructure or they lack the infrastructure needed for networks and connectivity. For example, I live out in Centurion and we don't have landlines, leave alone fiber. But we found an alternative, and the alternative was LTE. And with the LTE, excluding the challenges of load shedding and poor reception, we were able to actually render 1 or 2 sessions that was continuous without any challenges. So understanding what your challenges are, understanding what you need to do to work around them is going to be an important consideration for you to look into. Then there's the cost of data. Now, cost of data in South Africa, we all know, is quite expensive. But we're already seeing with the COVID situation currently that some of the network operators have already come to the party and have reduced the costs. And we hope that this is a trend that's going to go for post-COVID situation. Then there's the challenge around technology. And when we're talking about technology, we're actually talking about the readiness thereof. For the success of any telehealth or telemedicine services, smart devices and or video recording technologies are key in providing remote monitoring. We as clinicians need to understand when communicating with people with disabilities and when we participate with them in this remote type of service, there may be challenges around technology usability or technology accessibility that we need to overcome. We need to become knowledgeable in what the technologies are and how we're going to be able to use them. We also need to understand that if we are going to give the clients or the patients a role in this technology, for instance, when we're asking them to either measure or to submit data, there may be a problem with them either understanding or misunderstanding or the use or misuse of this technology. The other consideration around the technology is when you are looking at involving other people other than the patient and yourself. For instance, your nurses or the caregivers or even other family members. We need to understand that they may not know or they may not understand the technology that you're going to be using, and they may find various challenges at the various stages of the technology, from things like connecting, installing, recording, programming, and even the submitting of data. So all these can negatively affect a successful session. And understanding what those challenges are and putting in place strategies will help us to deliver an effective session. Then there's the big question around regulation. Now, telemedicine in South Africa is relatively a new concept. It's not new in the world, but it's new in South Africa in the sense that we have not been really using telerehabilitation in South Africa. And so there isn't any decisive documented regulations around the rules and regulations with telerehabilitation. But we need to become aware of the legislation and what the compliances are. And certain things like, for instance, the Consumer Protection Act, the Protection of Personal Information, the Electronic Communication and Transactions Act, the Health Professional Act, the Medicines and Related Substances Act. All these acts will become relevant when the solutions and the devices that we use in the provision of telemedicine is selected and developed. And then you'll find as the telemedicine services develop and they mature and they become more adopted in South Africa, then we're going to start seeing the health regulators like the Health Professionals Council, national government, the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, all come to the fore, and they will have to ensure that laws and regulations around and policies, as well as guidelines addressing the telemedicine services, the healthcare practitioners, the medical devices, the reimbursement of the practices, as well as the data protection are developed and then refined, and hopefully in a manner that it will encourage innovation and that new solutions. We also need to make sure that we maintain patient safety and a positive outcome at all times. So how we behave now and how we move on from here and how we deliver our services via these platforms is going to be key in what regulations and what rules and policies are going to be put in place. So we implore with all of you to please behave ethically, maintain that the patient is key in this entire equation, and that you are going to deliver positive outcomes. Here in South Africa, we are actually quite lucky because our regulators have already come on board, and on the 26th of March this year, we found the Health Professional Council revising their stance on telehealth, and that stated that this is now a valid way of providing a service. However, with regards to physiotherapy, they then declared that it was going to only be permissible if there was an already pre-existing relationship between the patient and the therapist. But like I said, the regulation is going to be revised continuously as we develop this technology. And a week later, the Health Professional Council revised that particular stance. And now we as physiotherapists can see patients even if they were not pre-existing patients. This, they said, is going to be allowed during the time of the COVID. And we hope that we're going to, depending on how we behave, that it will be extended beyond. The next consideration to be taken into mind is that of the consent form. Now, the consent form becomes really vital and it's key. We need to abide by the laws. What we need to make sure that we do with regards to the consent form is that the therapist and the patient must have a willing agreement to be using this particular platform for treatment. And if, depending on the type of technologies you are using, whether it's like, for instance, we're using Zoom, there's an ability to either record the session or not to record. And if you choose to record, then your patient needs to give you permission to record the session. What we also need to include in the consent form is the parties involved, whether it's just the therapist and the patient, or whether it's patient, therapist, and caregiver that's going to be there. We need to make sure we record this properly. And the manner in which the consent form was received. Was it received via email, WhatsApp, SMS, by whichever means that you've received the consent form, it must be recorded properly and adequately. Then the last challenge I want to talk about is the remuneration. And I'm sure everybody right now is asking questions about how are we going to be remunerated. Jay and I have, in our research, have found that other physiotherapists in other parts of the country have opted to charge the client directly for this particular service, as it was not being covered by the national insurance funds. But we see here already our regulators coming on board, and the SASP has already come up with a modifier 0019, which we can actually use for some of the codes for the rehabilitation of our patients using telemedicine. Of course, you need to understand what that is going to be and how it impacts on your costs, because it's not going to be the full fee. But again, as it goes on, we're going to start seeing regulations change. We're going to see new rules come into place. And I think it's everyone's duty and responsibility to make sure we become aware and knowledgeable about what is happening and how it's going to happen. And what kinetic therapy, myself, Jay and Tanya, as well as Telehealth SA through Tian, we have taken a stance to make sure that we provide you with the information and help you on this journey. So Tanya, our IT consultant, is going to talk to you a little bit more about the IT considerations as well as the cybersecurity issues.
Thank you, Hanita. So as you've heard, there are many exciting and evolving technologies in the world of telehealth. But that doesn't mean that you have to be an IT professional in order to deliver telehealth services to your patients. However, it is necessary for you to have a basic understanding of how the system you're using works. This means that you should have some knowledge and understanding of the software you're using, the type of information being collected, how that information is being secured, and what backup policies you need to have in place. For the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to be focusing on Zoom, which many of you have already heard of, are already using, and as Jay and Hanita have mentioned earlier. Zoom is a secure online video conferencing facility that is built using the Amazon Web Services platform. That basically means that it's a cloud-based solution. The software can be used via a web browser, a desktop application, or a mobile application that can run on either your Android or iOS device. Physiotherapists can register for free or paid subscriptions of the Zoom platform. The only difference is the unlocking of additional paid features. but the free version is more than adequate for delivering telehealth services to your patients. The only limitation being a 40-minute time limit on your sessions. Patients don't have to register accounts with Zoom in order to join a treatment session. What they do need, however, is a meeting ID and, if it's specified, a password in order to join the session. A reliable internet connection will improve the quality of your session. Mobile data is adequate. However, a fixed line connection such as fiber is preferable. Zoom is an efficient platform that utilizes back-end server processing to deliver a high-quality customer experience. But it's important to note that the customer experience is affected by the quality of the internet connection of both the patient and the physiotherapist. This is a challenge which many of us are faced with. However, there is some hope. Mobile and fixed line operators nationally are making more bandwidth available at more competitive prices in efforts to support businesses who are moving to online platforms as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, let's talk about data security. Your Zoom session is encrypted by default from the minute you start a meeting. Only the participants in a Zoom meeting have access to the session, providing that the meeting is secured. You do that by specifying a password when scheduling the session. Consider using a secure platform like WhatsApp or Telegram to share your meeting links and credentials, that is, the meeting ID and password, with your patient. Once the patient is on the session, another way of protecting the session is to lock the room. This prevents anyone else from entering or Zoom bombing your session. This encrypted, password protected, and locked session will effectively protect your entire session. It is important to note that Zoom stores metadata about your session. However, your encrypted session itself is not stored. It is possible to record your session, which, depending on the type of Zoom account you have, could either be cloud storage or locally on your computer. Irrespective, it is vitally important that the strict rules and regulations governing the recording, storage, sharing, and destruction of this sensitive data is strictly adhered to. In addition to the HPCSA health regulations, the Protection of Personal Information Act governs how personally identifiable data may be collected and used, and it clearly outlines the rights and obligations of the owner of the data, which is your patient, and the consumer thereof, which is you, the physiotherapist. These are important considerations to bear in mind when making any decisions with regards to data backups and data retention. As Jay mentioned earlier, this can all be rather overwhelming, especially under the current circumstances. As an IT professional, my advice to you all, keep it simple. And remember, Kinetic Therapy and Telehealth South Africa are here to help. Ladies, do you have anything to add from a physiotherapist's perspective?
Thanks, Tanya. Yes, I do have some tips for you. We can all start with using these successful telehealth implementation strategies for the ongoing success of our profession. Number one, we need to recognize the patient and therapist needs are changing. Two, we need to deconstruct and critically analyze the traditional physiotherapy encounter. Three, we need to redesign patient care with value, focus on value. Most important, especially now, we are anxious and stressed and worried, but that should not stop us from being open to discovery, being bold, and being visionary. And finally, we need to be mindful of the importance of human and ethical practice.
My advice is apply the 3 Ps, that's preparation, practice, and persistence. Make sure that you prepare yourself with regards to the technologies that you're going to be using, as well as how to use them and your office space. So where you're going to be using the technologies. Prepare your patient, make sure that they understand the technologies, make sure they understand if there's any challenges, what needs to be done, and put strategies in place. Then practice. What Jay and I found was that through practicing with our family and friends, we actually became more confident in being able to use this technology, and it actually became less stressful for us to use the technology. So practice, practice, practice. And then persistence. Don't be discouraged. There are going to be challenges that you're going to face, but for every challenge, there is a solution. So just persevere. And this is an amazing opportunity for us as physiotherapists to play a role in the rehabilitation of patients and contribute to positive outcomes. I wish you well. Stay safe.
COVID-19 has created an opportunity for physiotherapists in South Africa to develop new skills and through the use of technology to deliver quality health services to your patients, even during the COVID-19 lockdown. Join Kinetic Therapy and Telehealth South Africa and be part of that change. Thank you for joining this webinar with Kinetic Therapy. Most importantly, stay healthy, stay home, and keep moving. Look out for our series of webinars that will offer additional guidelines and useful information. Connect with us on Telehealth South Africa's Facebook page or via www.kinetictherapy.co.za. We look forward to hearing from you.